Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Mariella, how are you?
Good, thank you. Sorry the other day.
Oh,
Things
that's okay.
happen.
These things happen. Everything all right with you?
Everything good. Just Alicia was a bit sick and I stayed home. I didn't sleep in the night because she had the vaccination, but everything good.
Excellent. Oh, goodness. Yeah, no, it's terrible. When your children can't sleep, there's nothing worse.
Exactly.
One, you feel bad for them, but two, you feel bad for yourself.
Exactly. Is everybody sick when they are
Yeah,
sick?
exactly. So do you have to go at 11:30 today?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, we will sort of push on through and see if we can oh, there you are. And yeah, push on through and then see if we can get you to have some time just for conversation at the end. But if you need to go, then that's absolutely fine.
That's okay. Anyway, I will learn listening.
Hello.
You logged in twice, Mitch. Or is the other one Megan? Yes, that's Megan dropping in. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Cecile.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So I'm just finishing off an email.
Yeah, so Silicon South has logged in 3 times, but is 2 of those times you, Mitch, or is that Megan?
Hello, sorry, it's taken me so long to try and get my sound working.
Right, you're there.
And then Zoom wasn't working either, so it's playing games with me this morning.
Right, okay.
Sorry, so do you want I'll start again. Oh, God.
Fully present. Hello.
Very interesting kind of having that put in that way in the context of the situation that we're in at the moment. So I thought
I picked up on that, and it echoed with some other work I've done as a cycle campaigner, cycling infrastructure campaigner. I'm a member of the BH Active Travel Forum, and we sort of lobby MPs and councillors, and we have meetings with highways engineers to try and improve the infrastructure for cycling and walking. And so I've been following all the academic research in transport studies and so on, and there's been some really good work on disruption theory in I think various university teams have done projects on this, and it's about the idea of it's a kind of this idea that people are more likely to start walking or cycling if there's a significant change in their life. Say they change their job, they move house, their child goes to university. All these sort of transition points in people's lives are where they're most likely to sort of try doing something differently. And it sort of fitted with that.
That's a really good point. We should probably crack on though, but the transition points I think is good. There's some interesting stuff. I'm sure probably Carolyn would kind of chime in with some of those things as well. But anyway, sorry Carolyn, I'm not putting you on the spot. So anyway, we're here. Andrew's here. Everyone's here. Oh, Tracy's gone, but I'm sure she's around there somewhere. How are we all doing? Everybody okay? Yeah, excellent. So today we want to look at what is it that you need to build to release. What's the minimum amount that you can get away with to some extent? What are the choices that you need to make? What's the purpose of getting out there? How quickly can you get something out in front of people? And then we'll spend a bit of time thinking about some of the process involved in that, and just to explore, it may well be stuff that you know already, but I'm also surprised about how often people don't really think through the project management elements in terms of how to pull something together to make sure that the projects that they're trying to deliver is delivered on time and within a reasonable budget and all those kind of things. So we'll cover some of that ground as well. But yeah, we're going to start off with Andrew. Welcome back, Andrew. Love to have you here. And so Andrew's going to talk us through that whole point about getting an MVP, the purpose of the MVP, and how to get there. So Andrew, do you have slides? Do you want to share the screen or anything like that?
I can do. I think this. What slides have you got, Anthony? The ones, you know, the ones we mentioned this morning, the ones we mentioned yesterday on the phone. Do you have a couple of slides there? The ones we used previously.
I can show you what slide. Okay, I can show you.
Because I think they're the same ones. I think they're the right ones. Morning, everybody.
I'm not convinced these are yours. I'm not sure I ever had your slides. To be honest. I'll show you what I've got here.
The shoe one's mine. There should be. Hopefully, there's 2 slides.
I've got this. Can you see that?
Yeah, that one was yours. That's fine. Have you got the shoe one?
No, I didn't have that. I just had some notes about that. I don't, because it was on your computer.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. Bear with me 1 second. I'll just get that to the. Oh, yes, please. Where are I? 1 second. Just got to find my screen. Yeah, right. That's it. I can share my screen. That's fine. Right, can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Anthony. Morning, everybody. Good to see everybody again. So the topic of today is, or my topic, is around how you can build something to test your theory. Now, in this document is actually headed product, but this applies equally to if you're providing a service, it works in exactly the same way. Okay, so I'm using product in a very broad sense. So product is the thing that you are actually selling, and I think what I'm about to talk follows very much a known principle, which is called the lean method. Basically, the principle is that to test what you want to take to market, you should take the minimum you need to prove your idea. Okay, so the basic thing you're thinking is, what's the minimum thing I can sell and build and get somebody to buy that? And once somebody does that, you've proven the idea. And you can talk to as many people as you like about your idea. You can get as many focus groups as you like. You can do as many surveys as you like, but you will only find the truth once you start to ask people for money. And as soon as you start to ask people for money for your product, you'll realize whether you've actually got something that people are really interested in or not. Without asking for money, people will generally tell you what they think you want to hear. Okay, and the same applies to pricing as well. So you only find out the true value of pricing when you start asking for money and when you start asking for more money. And I'll tell you a little story about that in a short while. And in my experience, speaking to a lot of startup founders in service businesses or in product businesses, the general rule is that people almost always, and it is a huge generalization assumption, which I know never work, but people always overcomplicate things. They generally try and think they need to build out much more than they need to offer more than they do, and it takes them much, much longer to get to market. So what we're going to talk about today is that you really need to strip back as much as you can, and just to figure out whether your proposition makes sense. So one of the good examples here is, if you look back into the early days of Deliveroo, there's a fable story that apparently the way that they proved their idea by literally no more than putting a leaflet around some shops, set around some houses in their nearby town, offering a delivery service for any type of food. and they would basically get people to ring that number. They would take the orders for the food. They would then go and buy the food from each individual shop, and then they delivered it. So in effect, all they needed to do to prove their idea was get some leaflets printed and understand how much they were charging for the food and how they were going to charge for their delivery. They didn't actually build any web app, or they didn't build any product. They literally just tested it by putting a leaflet up with a phone number. Okay, so they didn't need to spend millions and millions of pounds building out an app and getting delivery drivers. It was, what did they prove to start with? And one of the interesting things that I think Anthony mentioned in week one was Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn is well known for basically saying, you know, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you release, then you're releasing too late, simply. So there is a huge tendency to overcomplicate and overbuild things. So I'm here to encourage you to think about the minimum that you need to try to get this to work. So there are sort of two main elements here that are summed up in the slide in front of you. And the first thing is, what's my riskiest assumption is an okay way of saying it. I think of it more as, what are you trying to achieve? What are you actually trying to sell? And I'll give you an example of this in a minute, to do with shoes. And then the second question is, what's the smallest, and we generally use the word experiment. So what can I do? What's the minimum amount I can do to test whether my assumption is right or not? Okay. And then to do that, you basically set up a goal of what I'm trying to achieve. You draw your flow of what you think the customer needs to do to achieve that goal. Then you write down the features within each of those flow steps. And again, we'll come back to this in a second. I'll show you an example. And then we test it. We see if we can get that to work. And if it doesn't work, we have to change some of the steps we do. We might have to add more. If it does work, you can maybe take some off and see if it works with doing less. And then basically you repeat this process until you have a product that you can get more than one person to buy. You can maybe get 2 people to buy it. Okay, so those words sometimes I think come up as a bit confusing. I think it's much easier if we share a diagram. So this diagram, so Anthony and I talked about shoes. This is a good example of, thank you, how we do it. So if my assumption leading into this would be, for example, I think my risk assumption is that, you know, I'm making some customized shoes and I'm not sure people want to buy them. So my goal is can I get somebody to buy a customized shoe is my goal. So the steps that we have to go through across the top is, we have to let the user customize the shoe to start with. We have to let them buy it. We then have to manage the order and deliver the order. And underneath are the steps that the customer needs to take to fulfill this feature. So what do I need to do to let a user customize a shoe? So it could be that, well, I have to maybe supply them with some templates. I have to show them some palette colors. I have to show them some different soles. I have to show them some decoration features, maybe. That may be your customized shoe option. For the buying the shoe, I literally might just have to let them pay me somehow. So that could be taking cash, it could be taking check, it could be paying on the website, could be setting up direct debit, it could be using Klarna. You don't have to do all of those options to prove your MVP. You could decide that from an MVP perspective, I'm only going to take cash payment there and there. That could be your first assumption. I then have to manage the order. So I have to basically get the shoes made as a minimum. I might have to show tracking. And then I have to deliver it. So I have to make sure that the person gets the shoes. So do I deliver them myself? Do I get a delivery company? And the way that you think about each of these steps is very different at the stage of your journey. So the easiest way to do it is to basically write down all the things that you can do, and then what you basically have, you have this MVP line, and you basically think, what's the minimum I can get away with? And you determine which of the steps you absolutely have to do to try to prove your goal, and then you try it. You see if it works. And this applies equally to service as well. Again, just to reiterate the point, this does apply equally to services business as it does to product businesses. Okay, so in terms of services business, you think about more about what level of consultancy I can provide, how many days do I need to do, what outcomes do I, what documents will I need to write, okay? But the same steps will apply. And you can do this you could fulfill this MVP by talking to people, by meeting them face to face. You could have a website, you might not have a website. It's entirely down to you to figure out the best way of proving your theory. And this all comes back to the minimum you can get away with and get somebody to buy your product. Okay, so let's just talk about pricing for a second. And why this is important here is that, again, vast generalization, which I know doesn't apply, is that individuals and companies generally always undersell or underprice. It's particularly true with products, but also with services. So one of the things that I encourage people to do, which sometimes is an interesting conversation, is I challenge people to double their prices. So if you've got an established market price for what you're doing, then this won't apply. So if you're, for example, I think of a stupid example, simply because I had it done yesterday. If I'm setting up a new window cleaning round, and I'm only saying that because we had ours done the other day and it made me think of something. If everybody's charging £20 for window cleaning, and you go along and suddenly want to charge £200, that's probably not going to fly. So you have to be within the realms of your market if you already have a market level set. If it's unclear what that market level is, then the onus is on you to find the right price. And typically people always go low. So the example my most recent example is I've been working with a local startup who are basically selling some software to help manufacturers make things more efficiently. And they've been talking to some customers and they've sold it. And I said to them, did the people push back on the price? And they said, no. And I basically said, well, you're not charging enough. They're like, no, it's still quite expensive. I said, if they're not pushing back on price, if from a B2B perspective, if people aren't pushing back on price, you could charge more. So I challenged them to double their price on their next deal. And the next deal was with quite a large company. Now, they didn't actually double their price, but they did put it up by 70%. And the business that they sold to, they did actually sell it to them, didn't object on price. So I said to them then, they've still got to go back and they should have doubled their price, but they've still got to put their price back up. And they haven't done that yet because they're still very early days, but they were so overjoyed to win the customer. They put their price up by, so if you imagine they were charging £10, they then went to the next customer and charged £17, and they still didn't get any objection. So not only did they generate an additional £7 revenue, they've also still got room to grow in the way that they're selling their business. Whereas if they just stayed at £10, 10 customers would give them £100. Whereas if they're doubling to 20, then that only takes 5 customers. So what I always try and encourage people to do is, if you're brave enough, if you're charging £10 and you don't get any objection in the early stages of your project and with early customers, double your price. So if I was £10, I'd charge £20. If you don't get any objection, then double again. So if I was at £20, I go to £40. If I don't get an objection, double again. And you keep doubling until you get an objection or more than one objection. If you get an objection, you go halfway back between where you were and where you are now. So if I've gone from £20 to £40 and everybody objects, what I do is I go down to £30. If everybody objects at that level, I'd go back down to £25. And then if people didn't object, I'd go back up to 27.5. So basically what you're trying to do is trying to find a level of that people are willing to pay. Now, if you look at pricing theory, a lot that comes in here is this is about how many people will buy at a given price point. So for example, if I can get out of 4 people, say for example, if I try and sell to 4 people and I get 3 buying at £10, but only 2 buying at £20, then I'm better off selling the 2 at £20 because I've made £10 more. And people often completely ignore that and think I've done really well to sell at £10 to 3 people, whereas they don't understand and work the economics of selling at a higher price and how fewer people you do that. So the early stage in your business is exactly the right time to try and figure out the price point for your proposition. The more customers you get and the longer you are in business, the harder it becomes to then fundamentally play with your price. Okay, so again, in this session, that's around all the talking I want to do. What I want you to do is have a bit of an exercise, and we can talk through this, we can answer questions, make it very interactive again, is you may have already done this and you may already have a live product, which is absolutely fine. We can talk about what you do in this installation. But if you're still early, is literally try and draw, if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, I've got a template, but there's no real point, it's just as easy to draw out, is think about your goal, draw out a user flow, the steps that the user needs to take across the top, and then underneath each one, list out the steps that that person needs to take, okay, and then try and visualize or think about what your MVP line is. So walking skeleton is basically, it's almost like before an MVP. So you go out and just test the theory. I wouldn't worry about that at the moment. I'd just focus on this MVP line. So where you need to go and prove your concern, and then think about how you actually can implement that. So I'll give you another example just to set you off. I worked with a lawyer who wanted to set up a company to start up to basically make house purchasing easier. And the biggest time taken was basically in the generation of documents. But from a technology perspective, that was also the hardest bit to build. To build what he wanted to build was very, very expensive and would have taken a lot of money. So what we talked about was actually, to start with, he should do that bit manually. So for the first 10 customers, he could basically go and do the bit that he was going to have to pay to get technology, but he could do it manually. So he could sell the process, he could sell the service, people would send him documents, and then he would basically throw them out the back end, but he would get them done. He would do the work that he needed to do it manually, and then throw them out. So he'd basically make it longer. So rather than it being done in 10 minutes, he would do it promise to do it within 2 hours, which is still a lot faster than people do it. So he was basically not having to implement the most expensive part of his business by doing it manually, just to prove the theories, whether he could get people to buy the overall product. He didn't need to go and spend £100,000, which is what had been quoted, to go and build his product first before he started to sell it. And funnily enough, he figured out that idea didn't actually work. So he saved himself £100,000. He didn't have to go and spend it because the idea was a bit flawed. And so he pulled away from it and rethought it. But he basically proved that without spending any money. By just actually set up a really simple landing page website with an inquiry form and did it like that. So let's try and build out an example. Does that, before we start, does that make sense to everybody? Does Cecile, you have a question? Oh, do I need to unmute you 1 second?
Yeah, sorry. So on the double of the pricing thing, I have personally done that myself when I was charging consultation fees.
Okay.
For £120, and then I charged them £240. and it didn't seem to make much difference. But what happens if you essentially, if nobody buys, if you're not so the business to business where you can talk to people in a one-to-one, but what happens if you say, here's my product for, you know, £12.50?
Can we assume that you're actually talking to people about it and nobody wants to buy it?
No. If now this is on the other project, and then you present it to the universe, and then how do you know if they don't buy? How do you know that's your price or not your price?
Well, you don't know if it's your price. That's the whole point. So if you've got it presenting it to the universe and you're generating some business, as in you're generating some flow to your website or whatever that may be, or you're talking to people and nobody's buying, there's something wrong somewhere, but you don't know where it is. And that may be your price, it may not be. It could be your proposition. So what you have to do then is you have to go back to your MVP and figure out, in effect, what needs more depth. So for example, what you might need to do from an MVP perspective is you might find that you're not doing enough in the customized shoe area. So maybe the silly example is maybe in this, for my MVP, maybe I didn't let people choose a color of a shoe. So maybe I need to go and let people choose the color of a shoe and charge them. Pricing is one lever. So I could actually say, well, actually, maybe I'm charging too much. So let's go down to £9.
Okay.
So there are many levers.
Okay. And then you basically have to test and measure and test and measure.
Yeah, test and measure, test and measure. And you can do things like, I mean, if you're talking like websites and products, then you can get into what's called, you're probably familiar, A/B split. So you can try two different ways of doing the same thing and seeing which one works. So presenting a proposition in a slightly different way. And that's really good for testing out web flow and web design, for example, and technology product design. But yeah, you just have to sort of, if nobody's buying it, one of your assumptions, your MVP or your product is wrong. So whether that be your proposition or your price, it's just a matter of playing with the levers according to what you think will work and just trying it again. Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that one. It's part of the joy of the startup. Anybody else have any other questions, or is everybody just?
I've got a question around pricing, Andrew, if I may.
Sure.
So obviously we're building a SaaS product, and mainly products are charged on a monthly subscription price.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're toying with, just be interesting to get your view on this. One of the things that we're toying with is actually not charging a monthly subscription price of say £5.
Yeah.
And actually charging based on the level of alerts that are triggered. Because accountants are tight. They don't want to pay for anything. And what we found in speaking to some of them is that pricing for any SaaS product aimed at accountants is always a bit of a moot point, because if you've got a practice that's got say 200 organizations and it's £5 per month per organization, that's £1,000. And straight away they will balk at that and go, I'm not paying that because I don't get enough value out of it.
Yeah.
I've spoken to some accountants, products that are £5, and they won't even pay £5 for one organization because they're saying, well, I'm only going to use one feature of that. So why do I want to pay £5 per month when I'm not getting enough value out of it? Yeah. So we thought to try and combat that kind of barrier to entry, that what we would actually do is not charge a set monthly subscription fee, but charge based on the metered usage of things that are occurring, to stop them, from getting that view, well, I'm not going to use all of it, because you can turn the suite of alerts on and off. So you would only get charged for the alerts that you are actually using, as opposed to just getting charged a set amount for the whole suite, even if you don't need it.
Yeah. So are you going to give it away if they don't use the alerts?
Well, theoretically, if you're not using the alerts, you're not getting any value from the system, are you? So from that point, it's kind of, I guess what we're trying to do is encourage good behavior here. If alerts don't trigger, that means that client's business is operating well. So, good for the accountant. If lots of alerts are triggering, then there are lots of problems. So therefore the cost would be higher. Because I guess in a way what we're trying to do as well is almost we're not then capping our, we'll have lumpy cash depending on what's happening in the business, but we won't be limiting our ability to earn money at £5 per month.
Yeah. Yes, that's an interesting one.
I'm not aware of anyone else doing it, so I don't know if that's a good or
well,
a bad
yes,
thing.
Yeah, that probably tells you a big story. The reason that there's nobody doing it, so that
they're not brave. They're not brave enough.
Maybe. I'd probably have a slightly different opinion, but I think there are. It's a really interesting point actually, and so I think that there are several elements that come into play on this. First one is, and getting back to real basics. If somebody's not willing to pay, then I would argue that the tool isn't giving them any value. So I think that the first thing I'll be really thinking about is what value am I giving to the customer if I can't justify that price. The second thing I'll be questioning is whether I am and this is nothing perfect, is that whether I am a good enough salesperson to overcome that objection in the first place. So I suspect if I said to an accountant, so accountants charge in a very typical way, and all accountants generally charge in the same way. I bet if you were to say to them, okay, can you just look at this bit of the P&L for me? I bet they wouldn't just charge you a tenth of a day just to look at that bit of a P&L. I bet they'd look at the whole, and I bet they'd sort of manage to sell you that they couldn't do that, and they need to look at the whole thing. So I think that there's a very different mentality between, accountants are very good at selling a service in a boxed way and as a proposition. And I think from a product perspective, you need to think about that in exactly the same way. Yeah. So getting those to one side, part of the challenge with usage-based pricing is that usage-based pricing or alert-based pricing, as you're doing it, works really, really well if you can guarantee that the money that you can generate from the usage in the early days overcomes any cost of giving the license away, and you can convert enough customers through to generate sufficient revenue. So it's a bit like a freemium play. So freemium, where you're giving software away for nothing on the basis of what you want people to do, is you hope that some percentage of customers give you money to pay for the product.
Yeah, there will be different tiers. So the usage basis would just be on tier 1.
Yeah.
And then as we build out functionality, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, they would be based on a
so but the challenge with that is freemium is not a business model. It's an acquisition strategy. So freemium rates typically, just to give you an idea, is if you can get to a conversion rate of 10%, i.e. you give your product away to 100 customers and 10 of them buy it, you will probably be the best SaaS company in the world at a 10% conversion rate. Most SaaS companies operate at around 5% conversion from freemium. So SurveyMonkey, who sort of invented freemium, used to operate at a 7% conversion rate. Most organizations are less than 5%. And if you're in the gaming world, you operate on a conversion rate from free to paid of around 1%. So you have to get 100 customers to get 1 paying. So to scale those businesses, taking that approach takes you need a huge amount of customers. So that's something to bear in mind in terms of that free approach. So typically what you do in a B2B model is that you would offer more of a trial, like a 14, 30-day trial or whatever trial it is, and then cut them off. Because if you're very data heavy, then there are considerable costs to managing that free platform. So I've worked with some organizations where they've got 100,000 free users and it's costing them a chunk of money to manage those customers, and they're not leveraging enough revenue from their paying customers to support the 100,000 customers that are free. So that comes into play. And then I think the biggest challenge with it is that it's non-predictable. So if you've got no contract terms and you're just playing on usage, then it's non-predictable and you're not in control of it. So it ceases to be, you're almost starting to charge again every month. So if somebody just turns those alerts off that day, you've got no control over that and you've lost that revenue. So for me, it's the predictability and management of it that becomes the biggest challenge. The other thing to bear in mind is I always think that pricing, you're best to charge what people are used to paying in the way that people are used to pay. If accountants are generally difficult to sell to, but at the same time they're not used to buying on a usage base, it's going to be very difficult to convince them to buy.
Yeah, that is one of the considerations I thought about, is that accountants are creatures of habit.
No, because the other thing is they can't budget for it.
Yeah, they're going to want to know. They're going to want to know what they're paying month in and month out.
Yeah. So, and that's my experience with. I think a lot of people talk about usage-based pricing. A lot of people say they want it, but when the reality hits, when you say to them, so like it's the same with marketers as well. So a lot of marketing people, marketing directors in the bigger companies you go up, this sometimes becomes more of a problem, because what they generally want to see is they want to know what money they're spending for the next 6 to 12 months, because they've got a budget that they have to stick to.
Yeah.
You can't tell them whether they're spending £1 or £1,000 over the next 6 months. They just do not like that. Okay. They'd much rather pay, in certain cases, they'd almost rather pay more because they know it's predictable.
Yeah, same reason I've got a fixed rate mortgage.
Yeah, there you go. So I think you're that the challenge that you're getting into sounds to me more like a not presenting the value in the right way to encourage the charge, rather than you rethinking the pricing.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you again, John, by the way.
Andrew, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Tracy, of course.
So my product / service is already live. And I'm denied about pricing for ages, because I was looking at what competitors were charging in my market. And although I've got the knowledge and the experience, the product itself is new to market because it's not been seen before in terms of being attached to me. So I asked quite a few people. I just did a bit of market research about what price they would comfortably pay for the service.
Yeah.
And I was given very similar advice to what you've given us about doubling as you grow. So I'm now charging the minimum, which is a lot less than I would normally charge, but it's just to get the word out. And literally the website's being blasted out across social media this week. So I'm going to start getting feedback on pricing soon, I'm sure. But my question is, with my product, my service, I'm not comfortable doubling it, because if I doubled it at this stage, it wouldn't work. I'd need to sell a few packages. And even then, I probably wouldn't double it. I'd probably add maybe 100 quid to it, because that would be the top of the range for the marketplace that I'm in for one package. I've got 3. One is a one-off package. One is an ongoing mentoring package, which is based on my previous consultancy rate. And the third one is a bespoke package. So it could be anything.
Okay.
So I don't want to be stumbled by this, but I take the point that people have to understand value, the value perception.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned, and I know it's just early days still, but I'm concerned that perhaps they're not understanding that yet, even though I'm talking about it on networking events, face-to-face, because, you can get a lot of what I do for free, but you won't get, everything. You'll get the surface knowledge. You won't get the really deeper understanding of the technology and the hand-holding. And that's the challenge that I'm facing, is how do I get that value perception across so that I can double it in the future if I wanted to.
That's a really good question. Again, I don't think there are any simple answers. I mean, typically what I would do is I'd try and do this pricing test stuff before I start publicly pushing the product. So what
It's already out there.
Yeah, well, so that's the challenge. So this is, once it's already out there and you're starting to attract people to the site, you do start to get into a little bit of a more difficult situation, because there's a lot more about perception. So typically what I would do, and just for everybody else, if you don't have a product live yet, what I would encourage is, it can sort of go live, but just don't tell anybody. And then what I'd be doing is I'd be trying to get to almost one customer. If I can get one customer, then 10 to pay for it. So for example, with my last business that I stopped because I got bored, we launched an app on the App Exchange. Just didn't really tell anybody. And I then spoke to people I knew, my own internal mailing list, who I knew were the target customers, and basically tried to get them to buy it, and just didn't publish the link anywhere else. So at that point, that enabled me to then sell it to them at different prices, and I could just change my price. And eventually I figured out what the price point was. And only then did I think about, actually, now's the time to actually launch the product, because I knew I had my view of price point. Going back to Tracy's point, just if you've published, it's a bit more challenging. But then what you're into, a bit of a situation back with Cecile, whereas that just comes down to what's your value point. And the question I'm always answering is and you only need one thing, is what's the one thing that's driving people to buy that product? And if you're not articulating that, it doesn't matter what you charge, people aren't going to buy it.
Well, to be fair, the day it hasn't gone out to the world yet, it's just gone out to people I know. And I'm testing it, but interesting. It's typical, right? People who know you, care about you, they're going to say everything's fabulous. But they're not going to say your pricing's crap, you know, because they don't want to offend you. But the people who are focused on, on business might say something. But I think I sold my first package when I did one networking event, and I hadn't even pressed the button on the website. Cool. So in that case, I felt confident that my value perception was right. Since that was a week ago. This week, I've had a call with someone, a Zoom call, and the words she used was, "That package feels right."
Yep. Okay.
So I've got two people, one who's paid and one who's willing to pay. Cool. But it's like, that's my only sort of temperature check at the moment. So I'm confident that it might, it's early days still, but and
are you intending to sell this always through some level of?
It's the entry level product.
Say again, sorry, Tracy.
It's the entry level. So it's basically the first package that people get when they come to me, which is the most reasonably priced. And it also puts them into the sales funnel, so that if they have a good experience, they could potentially move into package number 2, which is a long-term mentoring monthly retainer.
Yeah. So the product is always something that's going to involve a level of personal interaction between you and the customer.
Absolutely. It's me. I am the product.
Okay. So in that instance, are you publishing your prices on the website?
2 of them are on and actually that feedback I've got has been really positive. People are saying, thank you for putting your prices there, because so many people who do what I do hide the price and you have to contact them, and that's a barrier. I'm just like, here's the price, boom. My challenge now is to market myself, to explain the value. I think that's what
absolutely. I think going back to the first point though, I think I would almost go the other way on that. I think until you've established your right price point, because when you're publishing prices, it's difficult to put them up. So I understand why people don't put prices on the website, and there absolutely is a barrier. So, but what you're trying to do, you're not trying to do it as a barrier, is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to encourage people to contact you to talk about it, so you can then figure out your price point. So this comes back to, it all depends where you are in your business and how you talk about price. So I'm all for really transparent pricing once you understand what the right price is and you know that you can sell it at that price point. If you're not, then what you might want to think about from a website perspective is and you can do this quite simply in most situations, is try this A/B split thing. So in a lot of, depending on how you built your website and who's built it, it may be very, very simple to do, is that you can almost present 2 different web pages to 2 different. So if you've got 10 people visiting the site at any one time, 5 see one page, 5 see the other, and you figure out which one gives you more conversion. So you can try different price points, you can try different wording, and you'd be amazed. Things like button colors can make a huge difference to conversions and placement of buttons, prices, content, copy. So if you are looking at, I mean, so that does sound like if you've got one person who's bought and the second that's about to buy, then I'd be thinking around how many other people have I spoken to get those 2 customers? Is it, if you've only spoken to 4 customers, then that's a really good conversion rate. If you spoke to 100, it's probably not.
No, it's I mean, I can actually count the number of people because I've been tracking each networking event and exactly how many people I speak to within each event. So I can literally get that number today.
Yeah. So understanding.
Yeah.
And what getting to that. So what you're really interested in is you want to improve that conversion rate.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Don't worry about setting a target of what it should be. Just think about, I need to improve it. So if I'm speaking to 10 people, I want to convert 3 of them. If you're converting 2, think, right, I need to convert 3 out of the next 10. What can I change to convert 3? Always bearing in mind the price and the proposition. But it does sound like if you've got a couple of people that are biting, then again, it sounds more like a perception and presentation of value, not necessarily price. But again, it's very difficult. One of the hardest things I think is getting as an independent in a mentoring coaching environment. Everybody thinks they can get everything for nothing.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing I've done, one of the hardest things I've done in the last couple of years is basically try to do some proper advisory mentoring stuff. And it's quite hard. It's really hard because the value comes when you meet people face to face. It's very difficult to get that value across in a paragraph on a website.
Which is why my marketing strategy is video, and that's going to work because it's worked in the past. Yeah. And I have, in terms of the pricing, where I put it on the website, I've actually said introductory offer, so everybody knows it's not going to stay that price. So that's been my first sort of step.
Yeah, see, I would argue, I don't know what else to do. Yeah, I would question how well that works in small number of, so if you're working in a very small pool, as in you're dealing with individual customers and you're not doing mass consumer model, if you're going out to thousands and thousands of people, I think that introductory offer, it's like a clickbait thing. It works for a very small percentage of people. Most people will see straight through that and go, actually, that's not an introductory offer. It's just a blag. But the reason that people do it is that so they get to the small percentage of people who do buy into it and think they're getting a bargain. Whereas that only works if you're applying it to 10,000 people, because you'll get 0.1% of a conversion or 0.01. That's all they need. If you talk to 2 or 3 people, I think I'd question whether that sort of thing will make much difference.
Okay.
I don't know, but it's just an interesting thing to test.
It's very early days, though. Literally, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to try stuff.
I've got a list of exactly who I'm sending the website link, even though the website's been live now for 10 days. I've been very strategic about who's seen. Obviously, anyone can look at it if they find it, but. And I'm tracking analytics every day, so I know where it's coming from. And a lot of it's coming from social media, because clearly that's what I do. Yeah. But I think when I send out my first newsletter, which will be to quite a large database of people I've known for years, that I feel will probably give me a much clearer sense of interest.
Yeah. Do you have much content on your site, Tracy?
I did, and I've actually just been reducing. I've kept it very as simple as possible, because 2 of the sales packages can be bought online. and has to be understandable. But at each case, I'm asking people to contact me, speak to me. It's never like just press a button, buy it, you know. And I know because I've been on the other side of that experience where I've paid for coaching and I've always reached out to the person before I've paid for anything.
Yeah, it's interesting because some of the most successful coaches I know, you know, one of them said to me once, one of the guys, he said that when I started out on the like advisory stuff years and years ago, a few years ago, he basically said, give away everything you know, as in just publish it. Don't be scared, just write it down. He said, because from a coach, what they're paying for is what you're not giving away is what people are going to pay for is you, not for the content. So this person just literally just generates loads of content. He's got a blog and he just writes 2 pieces a week, just about stuff he knows. He just disseminates this knowledge, and that's generated a huge inbound engine for him. And he now knows that he will convert. He'll get 100 people on his, you know, he gets 1,000 people visiting his site a week. He knows he will convert 10% of them to paid clients. But it's that giving the knowledge away that's enabled him to do that. So I think there's always this dynamic from a mentoring, coaching, professional service perspective, is that you can't give what you know away because that's your value. And by and large, that's not your value. Your value is you. Writing stuff down, it's like writing a book. It's like, if you wrote a book, you wouldn't be afraid to say, well, actually, no, you can't have that because that's my value. It's like, actually, no, I want you to read the book and then talk to me so I can sell you me. And that was a really interesting thing for me because I was really scared of writing stuff. And he was like, no, just write everything down. All people think you'll do is that they'll think you know your topic, and that will give them trust and value in you as an individual and a coach and advisor, rather than present this blank page that says, I'm an expert, talk to me.
That's very encouraging to hear because I'm currently writing my first blog.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So I'm on the right track.
The biggest thing I would suggest, if you can do it, I'd be smashing out blog entries twice a week. Let's just start, and I guarantee that will work, but it will probably take it 6 months.
I've given myself a year with content strategy.
Yeah, year's fine. Yeah,
I'm building a YouTube channel, which is a whole new ball game. It's not something I've never done before.
Yeah, you have to. The thing about this, Tracy, is you're right to give yourself that much time, because if you look at this, I saw a really interesting study. I'll see if I can dig it out. Basically, I think that most people stop probably just before it looks like it might be successful. So what happens in a blog is that you get lots of, it like drips along like really, and you don't think you're getting any response, and it goes up really, really slowly, really, really low, and then all of a sudden it goes up like that. But you never know when that point is going to be. So majority of people, they sort of do it for 2 months and they stop, or they do it for 3 months and they'll stop, or they do it for 4 months. And if you look at a lot of the studies, the ones that have been successful started to show success on or after 6 months. But they're literally just getting no traction at all for 6 months. It feels like, you're getting 1 reader, 2 readers, 3 readers, and you feel like it doesn't work. But if you look at there's a lot of studies, 6 months on is when you start to show some impact. And the people that generally get success, a lot of them get success because nobody else carries on that long.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets bored and thinks it's not working, so they give up. But that's the entrepreneurial journey in a startup. Most people are successful because they carry on.
Yeah.
And everybody else falls by the wayside because they give up. You've got to have that tenacity to keep going and just believe in what you're doing and give it time to work. And then what happens with experience is that you sort of realize whether it's working or not. But it just takes time to figure that out. You don't know that on day one. It's really hard. So I think you're giving yourself a good amount of time to get a social media strategy working.
Thank you. You've given me a lot of confidence that I'm on the right track. So thank you, Andrew.
That's like it. That's good. Well,
Can you show the previous slide briefly? I just want to have another look.
That one?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So just on the top one a bit, what you might need to do is, in terms of the first one, what's my riskiest assumption? You could actually break this down if you start to think about it a little bit more, is that you might want to do an MVP of a certain bit of your product rather than the whole thing. So this is where the riskiest assumption comes in. So the riskiest assumption, let's think of an example. I can't, one will come to my mind, but yeah, you may need to break your MVP down to go into a little bit more detail about the assumptions you're making, and test your assumptions one by one rather than as a whole. Because back to what Cecile was saying, in terms of if you get into the stage where people are not buying at your price and you're not selling your product, what you are doing there is you are making several assumptions in order for them to buy the product. So what you need to do is you need to rule out each of those assumptions one by one to figure out which is the one that's driving the sale, and which ones are actually fine. And it will always be, you'll probably find there's one or two, there might be one little thing that's holding it back. Could be one thing, and you've got to find out what that one thing is. Hi, Cecile. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Because how do you compete against the giants? So if now everybody is like paying £5.99 to watch any movie on Netflix, anytime, anywhere, you know, there's an expectation that then you should be able to pay a similar price. I guess I have to put something else of value on there.
Yeah, so that just comes down to value. You know, the world's and unfortunately that's hard, but it does come to value. Is that you've got to somehow differentiate yourself from that competing product and make people understand that they are buying something different. Okay. And that has to be something. There's no, you know, that's the reason why people spend £5 on a pair of shoes or £500 on a pair of shoes, or £5 on a handbag or £5,000 on a handbag. You know, they're fundamentally the same thing, but there's something associated with those products that make people buy the more expensive product. Status. It could be brand. Brand is absolutely one of those things. Status could be, is absolutely another. And it's very difficult from a startup perspective. What you don't have from a startup perspective, a startup doesn't have brand. No. You know, you don't, but you can't. I despair sometimes when I speak to startups. They're saying I've got a really strong brand, because I guarantee nobody's ever heard of you. You do not have a brand. Nobody's heard of you. So, and nobody cares who you are either. Yeah. You don't have a brand. You won't have a brand until you've got hundreds of customers. You know, you've got to build a brand, and you've got to, whether that be a personal brand or a company brand. But when you're a startup at years old, you don't have a brand. So it's really hard for a startup to differentiate on that to start with. You can certainly use it as a pillar of something you're going to differentiate on in the future, and use it as a cornerstone of your differentiation. But you can't rely on it as a startup. You've got to rely on the value of your proposition being compelling enough for people to buy, because your brand doesn't mean anything to them. Yes. If that makes sense. Yeah. But is at the end of the day, it's the value that comes down to value. So they have to get something more, even though if you're along the same lines, they still have to get something more than the big competitors. Yeah, and I guarantee in my experience, it will come down to the one or two things that people really latch onto when they buy your product or service. Okay. And that could be a feeling that it gives them. It could be something physical that they've done, but it's understanding and harnessing that what you're trying to get to with an MVP. Is you're trying to understand what's the compelling reason that the compelling reason to buy. What's the one thing or two things that they've done that you do that they are buying? And over time, you can add those out and they become more. But when you start, it's literally one or two things. But then those also shift depending on who your target market is. Absolutely, it does. But this comes down to, with a startup, why a lot of people, and why you read a lot of stuff, why a lot of people encourage you to really focus and niche down on one type of customer.
Yeah.
Because those types of customers should all have the same compelling reason to buy. If you start to dilute who you're selling to and have a really broad idea of your customer base, then what happens is you end up with different people buying for different reasons.
Yeah.
And what happens then is that you have to start to market and sell to them in different ways.
Yeah.
So you have to start pitching your website in different ways to different people of different types, which is absolutely fine. But until you understand what those differences are, the risk is that in the very early days is by presenting a mixed message, you're actually not articulating your value because it's diluted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why everybody talks. You'll get a lot of people talk about, and one of my, Anthony will tell you this, my big thing is about focus. It's about understanding completely who you are selling to and focus on selling to that person or company. And don't dilute your message until you understand exactly what that is. Too many people think that, you know, what the common conversations they have is that they always compare themselves to Nike, or they compare themselves to Facebook. And or you know, for your services, they'll compare themselves to their favorite guru, whoever that may be. And my question is, you can't compare yourself to how they are now. You've got to compare yourself to how they were 20 years ago, because that's where you are. So I was talking to somebody about sportswear, and they were saying, "Oh, I really want to be like Nike." I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And they were trying to launch like 7 products, and the customer base was all over the place. And I said, "Why are you?" And they had no concept of who their customer was. And I was like, "Well, who's your customer for this?" Because they seem to be trying to attract, you know, like middle-aged men who started running, mothers, children. And I was like, they're really a fragmented audience. I know they're all a family, but their goals and their drives are very different. And they were like, "Well, yeah, but this is what Nike does." I said, Nike's first product was a shoe. That's all they did for like 5 years. They built one shoe. They didn't all of a sudden they didn't have 50 products in day one. They had one shoe, and they basically sold it to athletes.
Okay.
That's all they did in 1971. That's all they did for years. So it's really easy to get dragged into this mindset of, I'm comparing myself to a big company and how other companies do it, whereas you've got to think really small and focused to understand the value. And this is what comes back to with the MVP, and that whole approach is you're trying to get back to what's my compelling reason why somebody's buying my product or service. Sorry, I've got into a rant there. Sorry.
No, it's all good, because
I'm so passionate about this stuff. I get carried away. Sorry.
Yeah, no, because I think it's also your expectations and what you are kind of seeing, and where the wider aspect of you focusing it down, and then you go about, and then there's that uncertainty. Well, is that really the audience that I want? When actually what fires my, passion is that audience. So, yeah. I'd rather have that audience, because then that I find exciting and dynamic. When this audience, I'm like,
well, yeah, I think the question there would be, to me, the smaller audience you're looking at should be a microcosm of your bigger audience. They shouldn't be different. One should naturally lead into the other.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Focusing is not about. Focus is about just taking your target audience and minimizing it down to a first group that you think you can target.
It's a niche, that's in a niche, that's a niche, that's in a sub
yeah,
market,
so it's just
that's in a bigger market.
It's not about talking to a different target and then moving across.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's quite an important differentiation.
That really clarifies things. Thank you.
Because you should never lose your, if you don't have your passion for what you're doing to your audience, I'd strongly suggest you rethink it.
Yeah, exactly. So
Because
then,
the one thing that's going to carry you through is your passion for what you do and who you do it for.
yeah,
If you don't have that, it's an even tougher journey.
yes, okay. Now that's that kind of that.
Yeah, think of it as minimized down. John, I'll come back to you, Marielle, in a second. John, you had a question?
Yeah, I suppose thinking about this as sort of made me realise that I still don't really know who my target customer is. I'm still thinking that I don't know who they're going to be yet. So I suppose I'm still at an earlier stage in the process that I need to do some kind of market testing to sort of find out who I need. Are you saying you just have to start somewhere? So focus on one customer profile, try that, and then if it doesn't work, then focus on the next profile. But at the moment, I don't know how to decide which, because I can sort of identify different customer types.
Yeah.
But I don't know where to start.
Right. Okay. So what I'd do in that instance is I'd be write down all the different types of people that you think might be interested, like categorize them, 3, 4, 5 categories of people, and I'd go and speak to some. I would actually go and speak to those people about the problem you're trying to solve.
Mm.
And basically what you want to try and do, I think, is I'd suggest you have a very similar conversation with all of them.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is you talk about the same topic.
Mm.
And then what you're trying to understand is which one or two or whatever it is are facing the biggest challenges with the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
And start there.
Got it.
Treat those guys as your first customer.
Yeah. No, that I think that's it. It's kind of the links. I think I'd sort of had it in my brain, but hadn't really connected it all together. So yeah, that's great. I'll do that.
So when my last business, this app one, I basically spoke to, because it was a product for small business, I spoke to something like 30 small business owners of varying different. So those business owners were of varying different sizes, different types. Some were solo, solo people providing a service. Some had 40 people, and I just segmented them, had the same conversation with them, and then tried to understand for which group of those people. So was it a sole trader? Was it somebody that had less than 5 people? Was it a shop owner? I had those different categories, and they literally tried to understand how for one group of people I could solve this problem.
Yeah, so it's finding the best fit.
Yeah, that's absolutely what you're trying to find. And I was just trying to find it for one group of people, because if I could solve it for them, I could then go and solve it for the others. Or even in certain cases, what you find is that that's the group I'm selling to.
Mm.
Maybe I think it's about understanding the size of your target audience.
Mm.
So it may be that you're, and I'll pick a stupid example. If I could solve a problem for males aged 51 to 53, if I can solve a particular problem for those people, and they're enough, and I can get to enough of them to sell to, that may give me the size of the business I need.
Yeah.
I might not need to sell to males aged 25 to 70. I might just need to sell to that one niche. And that niche may be small enough for me to have a successful business. But it comes back to what successful business do you want? Do you want to be if you're selling a service, do you want to be have a lifestyle service-based business with 20 customers a year, or do you want to build it up and become a franchise and have 20,000 customers? Because they're very different things. So the niche that you need to work on is they're poles apart.
Okay.
Just find that category of people that you need to solve the problem for first, and go from there.
Thank you.
Mariella, you had a question, I think.
Yes. So what I'm thinking is, because daily mine is already proof, I already sell the product, physical product. I need to get better in many things, but at least I know that works. I found a way. And I want to add now some digital products and also some kind of course relate to the products.
Yeah.
By topic. So how are I gonna rank that price? Because I was thinking, obviously, to sell, if somebody well, to publish in the web page, but also, should I sell it like monthly or a pack as if you want to use the resources of communication, how you can use it? I don't know, £10 the course, or even free, and later I will upsell something. Because my idea is, when I prepare each theme, I will prepare one big course.
Yeah. What, the intention to sell the whole course or individual ones?
But at the end, because it's gonna take me time to develop each one, so I will prepare it in a small batch.
Yeah.
While I'm preparing like the email marketing, the social media, I will make my research and I will prepare one mini course of one topic. And make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean,
So which price?
I mean, presumably there are some, I mean, this sounds like an example where there will be some level of market, you will have some market level. So, I spend, I've done some like Coursera courses. I'm not saying they're the same, but, there is like a market level for courses that generally people set. Obviously the larger brands generally can charge more business for it, but so I know a few people that end up giving some of their courses away, like giving small taster courses away on a base of trying to then encourage people to buy another course. In terms of pricing level, I think you just got to look at what the market currently charges and see how much more or less, based on what you're selling and what your proposition is, that the market will bear. If you're going up, you need to just see how much the market will bear, and that will come down to having those conversations with individuals, as we're having with Tracy, to figure out what that will be. There's no sorry, go on.
Another thing, Andrew, I don't know, but I don't want to spend in advertising. Do you believe that I can do this organically through blogs?
Yeah, you can.
My
it would just take time. It's back to the conversation we had with Tracy. Organic, you can build out organic SEO. Content is probably the best thing that you can do to start to do that, and then pushing out on social media. But it just takes time. It's
yes, I feel it's a loss of money when you spend. I know it's a learning journey, but when you don't have the money, I think you should spend until you gain money or you have some sales secured.
Yeah, I mean, remember, I think the couple of things to say that you're absolutely right. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money, and then you have to do it in an organic way, and that's absolutely when I started one of my previous businesses, we didn't have any money, so we did everything organically and bootstrapped, and we had to go and generate money so we could then spend money, and that's what we did. And you absolutely have to do that. But the thing about advertising is that it's generally there to make you money. So the idea is that you spend £20 and get £100 back. It's not that you spend £20 and lose £20. So, and the other thing that does it speeds stuff up. So it brings customers to you quickly. So the organic thing will absolutely work if you give yourself enough time. But I think advertising can absolutely speed you up. And if you've got something that will sell, then you can scale it. Advertising gives you speed and scale much more quickly than organic growth.
After you try your product.
After you know what your product is,
that works.
Sell it. Yeah. And that's where for large businesses that scale, most of their spend to a point goes on marketing, because it's about scale. So I'm sure John as an accountant will be able to give you percentage of spends based on marketing, but generally when you're scaling a business, certainly, you know, once you're hitting, if you're raising big money, you scale a business through marketing spend. That's what you do.
Okay, so I just gonna wait a bit to try my idea, which I can do some ads for the shop because I already tried that, but the other part, wait a bit.
Yeah, the organic's absolutely fine. I mean, you've got organic's perfect, and it would just take a bit of time. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I speak? Is everyone?
Yeah,
hello?
go.
Can you hear me?
Go, Judith.
Okay. This has been very helpful for me because what it's told me is that I have to work out who my customer is. And it's very, very helpful. I want to offer an umbrella service for health because people can't access their doctors. It's very, very frustrating. But I need to also find out if such as already exists. It has to be a trusted service. So I wouldn't have any problem with marketing, including advertising, but I have to work out who my customer is. Is it patients, i.e. you and me? Is it doctors and their surgeries? Is it the NHS? And until I've managed to do that, work out who is actually going to pay for this, I'm sort of treading water. So it's been very helpful this morning looking at that product page that I'm still looking at to tell me that I've got to clarify this.
Yeah, and certainly what you're doing, Judith, that that sort of area where what you're doing is you're getting to an end user, an end customer, as in a patient, but how you get to them, i.e. whether you go to them, you've got to go through them potentially through somebody else, like a doctor or a hospital, does add a layer of complexity that you need to obviously understand, because as you say, how does that get paid for, and how does that work? There is an extra complication there that you'll need to obviously figure out.
I'm basing it on two key things. Number one, the big problem. These were two problems I want to solve. Number one, it's almost to get through to the surgery on any given day. It's very difficult to access doctors. That's number one. And number two, I know from my other work that medicine is 99% common sense. And I've been told various doctors. So that means that people can help themselves to better health. And that's what I want to come in and offer that. So I don't know if I can see my customers being the patients. I can see them being the doctor's surgery, it being the NHS. So I've got to work out how to formulate my offering. And once I've worked that out, and then the offering would be tailored to those different groups, then I can move forward into mix how to build this. Does that make sense to you, Andrew?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think it's interesting what you say, because I think we've already touched on some of this with Cecile and Tracy around, the challenges. I think it's going to be how you articulate the value of that to make it believable, to get people to buy, if that makes sense.
Yes, my computer cut out for 10 minutes while you were speaking.
Took
me
okay.
10 minutes to get back. So
yeah,
I didn't hear what you were saying to a couple of other people.
Yeah, so it's about how you are. So a lot of this comes down to how you articulate the value. So a lot of time, the challenges that every startup and every businesses face is that everybody says things. Everybody says it's faster or it's cheaper, or And a lot of people claim things that aren't necessarily true. And as soon as you start saying the same thing as everybody else, there's no differentiation. So, and if you don't have any differentiation, then you're not articulating your value. So articulating your value is a really challenging thing to understand and get right, because I guarantee, there'll probably be people out there who say exactly the same thing. And back to Tracy's point earlier, is a lot of people with a lot of things think they can get everything for nothing. So certainly from like a coaching, from an individual help perspective, they think the internet's there. So in the same way now, everybody thinks they're a doctor. I look at them in Google. I'm constantly having a conversation with my mother, and my mother knows better than the doctor about what she's got illness. And unfortunately, that's a way of life.
It's about gaining trusted information, because we trust our doctors. We still do. And we want to speak to them because we think, oh, they know us because they've treated us for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, but
so it's about getting that trusted information.
Yeah, it is. But you've got to make, that's the whole point. You've got to make the value of what you're doing resonate with the potential customer. So, and that's the, that's not straightforward. There is no right answer there. Nobody can tell you how to do that on a piece of paper. It's one of those things that sounds really simple, but is not easy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I wish I did have the answer.
Yeah.
Well, would it not come from
I will do more research into what is already out there to help patients when they want a fast answer. Because I go onto the internet, I can find out whatever I like, but there are only sites I would trust. So maybe I need to look into it more. There's a lot of rubbish on health advice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the one thing I'd say there, Judith, is don't think I'd encourage you not to forget is that you are not your customer. So
no.
One of the things that people often do is they make assumptions that what they think is what their customer thinks. So there's a huge difference between what, not as in you, as in an individual, as a group of people here, we're all constricted by and constrained by our own emotions and assumptions. And invariably, I quite often talk to people and they're like, well, I don't understand it. I'd use this. I'd buy it. It's like, that's not the point. You're not your customer. You've got to put yourself in the minds of the people that you're trying to sell to, not yourself. The whole basis of you starting out, not you necessarily, but everyone, is because they have maybe got a problem that they're trying to solve or they believe is true. And that's what gives you the nugget of the idea. But then that's very different from assuming that everybody buys and works and operates in the same way that you do. And people operate in very different ways. So, and just for everybody, be careful not to project your own behaviors and assumptions onto those of your customer. And that's one of the things that generally people do. But, in everything we do. So the way that we have our logo, that your business logo, I guarantee that your designer would have done something that they like, and you'd have had a conversation that says, oh, I don't like the blue one. I like the green one. I like the red one. And it actually doesn't matter what you like. It's what your customers will like that's better. And there's probably no difference between a blue logo and a green logo. They're not better. They're just different. So, and better is an internal perspective, not an external perspective. And we generally, I think, as founders, sometimes do that too much. There's absolutely a level that you get to, but in the way that people buy and make decisions, it's a risky road that you assume that people work in a certain way, because they absolutely don't.
Thank you. I mentioned in seminars, I think maybe the first one, that I'm very aware that one of my customer bases, i.e. patients, have different levels of tech savviness. So if I divided them into 3 groups, there may be only one group those that are tech savvy who would want to buy this. So I'm aware of what you're saying. Absolutely. Thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Andrew,
Yeah.
can I ask, so would you, what are we doing next? Do you want people to feedback on the
so I was going to say, in terms of the time, again, this is one thing that it's not a 2-minute task. If people have got anything explicit they want to talk through on this particular thing, then yeah, absolutely, we could go through a couple if people want to. I was just going to ask you the same thing, actually, Antti. You beat me to it.
I mean, I've got things to say, but they don't have to be said this week. This is quite useful.
Go through those now. I mean, we've been talking round a lot. I don't know. I'm entirely in your hands, Anthony. You've got more stuff to go through.
Well, it's not what I want, Andrew. It's what our customers want. It's important. Actually in their hands. So does anybody want to feedback, kind of carry on with this? I mean, I've been doing some stuff because I've got a project that I'm working on the side a little bit at the moment, and it is quite an interesting exercise going through. I've done quite a lot of this, but just kind of reminding yourself, and really that element of just drilling down into, yeah, but who's it for? Who's really going to be for? And I think that's such an important question in all of this, and making sure that the features you're developing are right for them. But anyway, has anyone been able to? Do you want to get the other slide up, Andrew?
Yep.
Just on that, any progress on that? Anyone would like to feedback on at all? It's not compulsory.
As you know, we've built a product. Now I've been doing this process, I've kind of decided that actually we've missed out some quite big, important steps before getting to that stage. So we've kind of gone back now and started. So we'd spent ages doing a website and struggling with content of what we should be saying and what the message should be. And then we realised that we hadn't even bothered to ask anyone if they were interested in what we were doing. So we've now gone back and stripped the website right back to effectively, we were allowing people to sign up to the product, which was causing us issues. Because we're restricted to the number of organizations we can connect, and someone at the weekend added 30 organizations, we only had 50 available. So that caused us a headache. So we kind of had to go, well, we can't allow people to sign up to the product even though it's usable. So we've reverted now to just kind of putting a very simple landing page up, talking very loosely about some of the things we're doing to gather data about whether there's enough interest in there, and to obviously validate the idea before we spend any more time building out any more features and functionality, without knowing that there's actually a bunch of people out there that would be prepared to pay for it in the new year.
Yeah, that sounds sensible. We did one of these a few years ago, and one of the guys on there he had a very good partner who'd raised a lot of money, and it wasn't his money, but they'd spent over £200,000 in developing their product, but they couldn't really explain who it was for, and they really couldn't get their heads around the business model for it. So they were giving it away for free on the basis that they thought that people would be using a certain bit of functionality, but nobody wanted that extra bit of functionality to pay for. So they went for the freemium model, and basically nobody converted it. So that was like, but people wanted what they had. So trying to get real clarity in terms of where the value is on that, what people really want from that, sounds very sensible.
Just on that, John, one thing you might want to have a think about is, I don't know how you built your product, who's built it, but you might want to look at getting some form of stats really, really early on as to how people are using the product. What functions they are and what features they are actively using.
I've got a co-founder, so the tech side of things is kind of his domain.
So get him to track that.
We're able to track, people logging in. So there's a couple of products that we've got, which is Mixpanel. Mariella very kindly mentioned Hotjar the other week. So we've embedded Hotjar, which is actually great to be able to see physically what people are doing.
Yeah, so Hotjar and Mixpanel are good. Yeah.
So we are doing that. It's just the activity is not as you know, they're not logging in every day, which is what we anticipated. So that's one of the first things that we've kind of gone, well, okay, that's surprising.
Yeah, so that people generally won't. So we can talk about this more detail if you want, but generally what you might find is that you have to, and I think if I remember rightly, we've had a little bit of chat this before, what you might have to do is you might have to look at pushing stuff out.
Yes.
And this is where the charging stuff becomes a little bit more challenging, because invariably people don't want to log into software that they're not using.
No, they don't. And we've already said, look, you know, is it a Chrome extension which will notify them that they've got alerts in there? Is it an email daily saying, by the way, you've got, you know, 6,754 alerts kicking around? People need, you know, help. Because I just thought, look, for me, it's my starting point every morning. So first thing I do, I log in, what needs attention. Other people aren't, they're just, that's not how they're interacting with the product at the moment.
No. So it's again, it's a really interesting point, because this applies to a lot of, so that's about I think the question I'll be asking there is, what's the value I'm providing from the product? So I'll be trying to understand how I could and again, shooting from the hip a little bit, I'll be trying to understand how I could stop giving them data and start giving them insight, and what's the best way to give them insight in the most timely way. So it could be stupidly that the most effective way of doing them is by using something like Twilio and sending them a text message. Sounds really stupid, but I've seen this before, is that you add some form of outbound comms and their phone pings because of one crucial bit of information that you're pinging them, and all of a sudden that's the compelling value. And you've done all this work, but the only thing that they really want to see is that one little text message or a notification on their phone or an email or something. It's quite mad. But sort of stuff like that is pretty key. It sounds like you're going down the right road. But happy to chat about it offline or another time if that would help.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Carolyn, have you got anything to add?
No, I've just been taking an atrocious amount of notes, because I think Tracy asked all the questions that I have, because we're both in a similar line of consulting and trying to get clients in. So Andrew's already answered any questions I would have had. So
did it help, Carolyn?
Yes, it did. I've took a lot of value from your conversation around blogging. And also your story about your friend who does a lot of blogging, puts everything he knows onto the website, and then they buy into the consultancy, because that's pretty much what I was, my whole idea was moving towards, based on various conversations here and then with Anthony, is around the knowledge on the site, and then they're buying into me being the expert in that area, rather than my knowledge that I have stored in my head that they don't know I have unless I put it up there. So that was a really good, it's kind of a reaffirming big ticks from my side.
Fabulous. Okay. So I did say yesterday that we could have some time to chat amongst ourselves if you'd like to do that, or I can rattle through some thoughts in terms of how to make sure that you get to your MVP. And I mean, you know, some of you already have a product in place, so, and some of you would have done it. So, you know, it may be that it's not completely relevant at all times, but very happy to do that. And really just kind of in terms of some of the approaches for project management and how to start planning, getting on to the next stage and making sure that you're doing that effectively. So would that be a useful thing to do, or would you prefer to just talk amongst yourselves for the next 20 minutes?
No, that would be it. Could you just remind me what the M stands for? I presume VP stands for value proposition.
It's the minimum viable product.
Sorry?
A minimum viable product. So the basic product that you can, which is viable. So it's not about the value proposition.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear you. I think you've got to tell us now, Anthony, because
okay.
because you've sort of created this sort of generated a lot of curiosity in my head. So I want to know what you're going to tell us.
Well, John, prepare to be underwhelmed. Right, I'm going to unshare Andrew, and I'll take on with this. 1 second. Yeah, because I've got slides. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, there's lots of stuff actually which Andrew's covered most of that, so I'm not going to bother with those. And share screen. Great. Okay, so it's really just kind of looking in terms of getting to the MVP stage, in terms of releasing something that quite often people have got different ways of going about making sure that they deliver. So what I want to think about now is just a couple of the most common ways that people adopt in terms of actually doing some effective project planning and making sure that you've thought through everything. So if you're working with other people, it's very important to know what it is that you want them to deliver. They need to understand what it is that's expected of them. You need to have a good idea about how much price and budget you're prepared to commit to something. And even just getting things in order in terms of what the sequence needs to be. So it's not just the MVP, but it's also thinking through, well, what else happens? How do I, we talked about advertising or not advertising, but whether you pay or you don't pay, you still need to make sure that your message is out there. People still need to know that all of this is going on. So, the more you can plan that, the more you can then create a series of expectations on yourself, as well as a set of milestones and delivery dates to kind of basically keep track of what you're doing and get a sense of whether you start to fall behind, whether you're in front of things or not. So these are the two most common ways which are being used at the moment. So we'll start with waterfall. So waterfall is, it's really the idea behind waterfall is that you plan as much as you can in advance. So you've got a really good sense of expectation of what it is that you ought to be doing. So there's a discovery phase, and I mean, that's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking around at the moment. So all of that is your pre-production work, effectively. What are all the things that I need to know before I start committing time, resources, and money to the development of a product? So it's understanding what the business requirements are, all the stuff that we've talked about and Andrew's been talking about for the MVP, and then sketching that out into a series of activities. So at the moment, these examples actually just focus more on the development of the project itself rather than everything after it. But so there's something around the technical design. What do I actually have to develop? What needs to be built? And then what is the process through which that will be built? So I actually think, yes, oh God, I could have made this even more slides that I haven't thought about. Anyway, it's really good to think about this in terms of work packages. So what are the packages of work that need to be completed to get through, first of all, the kind of the main project delivery, but then also beyond that as well. So one work package could be around project management. So how much time do I need to dedicate to project managing this project, let's say over the next year? The second work package could be around all of the design elements that we need. So have I thought through user-centered design principles? Do I need to consider those? Do I need to think about talking to people, presenting stuff? Andrew was talking about A/B testing. When do I need that to be created? What's the basic design? What's the basic look and feel that I'm going to be developing around? A third work package could be around development. Again, this could be kind of maybe two work packages. One would be front-end development, one would be back-end development, in terms of, okay, what is the kind of the really in-depth techie stuff that I might want to be developing? Now that may not be applicable for everybody, so that's more in terms of, okay, but what actually has to be built? What does this look like? What's the interaction? What's the, again, the kind of the stuff we've been talking around already? What are those minimum steps that I need to go through in order to create something? Or you can start to think a bit more broadly in terms of, okay, well, these are the minimum steps that I want, but after I've done that, then I need to do this. and then I'm going to need to do this. And if I want to get to this bigger idea, again, the more you can think through that at the beginning, the clearer sense that you have of being able to deliver and making sure that everything has been included. And then you actually kind of develop all of this stuff. And then when you finish developing, you need another work package, which is around testing and making sure it all works. Again, maybe bringing users back into play to make sure that they can ratify and authenticate the things that you've developed. As we've already said, very important to talk to them beforehand, but also important to talk to them later on to make sure that what you've built is going to fulfill the expectations. And that's the sort of things that Mariella was talking about earlier on, for instance, and Tracy as well. Then another work package might be around marketing. How do I develop my marketing? What are the steps that I need to go through? What are the channels that I need to reach in order to reach those markets? And we'll go into this in more detail in a few weeks' time. But just sort of starting to log through kind of what the different stages are, even just thinking about making sure that you've factored in the time to write a marketing strategy. What is my marketing strategy going to be? And you may not have the answers for what that is now, but you know that you need to set aside a week to think through and come up with something. And then you need to set aside a month in order to start delivering that time. And then you need to start, you need to set aside some time for them to how that marketing comes. So you don't stop. Kind of the development of the project and the launch of the project is not the end. It's then all those other steps and kind of how you need to start developing those things to make sure that you are going to actually get the return that you want and the response. So it's all about just trying to plan your time and thinking through what the ramifications of each step are. So to start off with, you're going to have a requirements document, the scoping document. These things are, again, the sort of things that you've worked before with the value proposition canvas and the lean model canvas, but then also kind of putting that into a tangible set of deliverables. Right, this is actually concretely what I'm going to have. These are I'm going to map out my MVP requirements, and I'm going to think through each individual element, not just what the element must be, but what steps have to be gone through in order to deliver that element. So the element, let's call that a milestone. That's the deliverable part, but what steps and what actions and what activities have to be undertaken in order to deliver them. And from a technical point of view, it's very important that you think through what the technical functions are. So if you're going to start doing things which are clever, and start responding, Judith, if you're going to start to develop the sort of the scope of what you have, you think about, well, how do I introduce machine learning, let's say, into that in order to, that may be a little bit further down the line, but rather than it just being a search thing, how do I start thinking about what people want before they start realizing it themselves and just making more and more improvements within the functionality? And if you can scope that out, all of this has some value in terms of you understanding what you want to do from a business point of view, but also if you want to then apply for funding, this is the sort of information that people might like. And ditto, doing something similar with the design specification as well. So good things about Waterfall is that you get all of your requirements and the design up front. You've thought it all through. It's then quite easy to understand what the process is going to be. You can report back to yourselves or to anybody else who might be interested. It's if you've got known requirements, if you know what you want to have to deliver, it gives you a good sense of control over all of that. And the detailed documentation means you've set the goal, and you know when you're going to achieve those goals as well. The problems with it are, well, it's not always clear exactly what you need at the start, and that even though you put in these timeline things, I'll come on to that in a second, you've set this time frame. What happens if you miss it? What are there going to be? Does that mean you have to spend more money, or are you going to overrun? And then what are the implications of overrunning? And so there are these unknowns within that as well. And then when things are quite set, then introducing change, when there's that moment of going, oh, hold on, we could do more of this. But then is that factored into your budgeting? Is that factored into your time frame? How much is that going to, these kind of new ideas, can you bring those into play? you know, it's got a high cost, but then again, knowing what those costs are going to be up front, I mean, that helps to answer some of the questions as well. And then, and in the way that the nature of it is that you don't quite know what you have until you get to that moment of the big reveal, when you kind of reach the end of that planning stage and you go, ta-da, we've done it. And then you hope that what you've done is what is actually needed and what people actually want. But, you know, it doesn't always work out that way. And in a way, what it also does is it starts to set people going, right, that's your task, this is your task, everyone go off, do it. And although you're going to have project management meetings with the teams and the people involved, then there's not as strong a tie of collaboration compared with the agile process, which we'll come on to in a moment. But in terms of, you know, budgeting, you know, I think budgeting, that's useful to know. Whatever, how much money is any of this going to cost? And that money may not just be in pounds and pence, it could just be in your time as well. So it's quite useful to start thinking through. I mean, this is just, you know, stuff in terms of how much time is each activity going to take? Some preparation time, some project management time, you know, some design time, planning time, development time, testing, you know, all these things. And you can put in, this is just a, you know, a sheet that I use for, I mean, this is for relatively simple projects, I'd say, with something like this. So it's going to be quite technically complex. I normally go into a lot more detail, but it's things like, okay, who's going to be involved in this? How many days is it going to take? What's the cost of that involvement? So that's just for person A. And then it's consultant number of days, you know, what's the cost of those consultants? And then there are fixed costs, you know, in this case, if you're doing some events, it could be venue and it could be catering, but there are also expenses, you know, all of these things. And by, you know, multiplying days by price, you'll get to a cost. And even if that doesn't quite make sense, because obviously I've changed that at some point anyway. So, you know, but at the end of it, you can come up and go, okay, this project is going to cost me £90,000. And now, if that's your time that's going into that, then if the majority of that is your time, then that's fine. You know, maybe as long as you can survive, you don't need to know what that cost is. But if you then need to start bringing in consultants, it's good to have a good idea of how much money is going to be committed. And then that comes back to the earlier point. If you want to change your mind, you know, are you committing absolutely all the budget that you've got, or can you keep some contingency in there? You know, how much is this really going to cost you? And you know, the other thing which is kind of worth knowing about as well is that even if it is your time and it doesn't have a real value, if it comes later on, you want to start talking to investors. Investors are always interested in how much money has been put into that. And there's that term sweat equity, which is, you know, how much blood, sweat and tears have you put into the project, even though you haven't been paid for it. But if that value is £50,000, then the investors can start to see that you have got some skin in the game, which is something which interests them. So in terms of how this can look, does anybody use Gantt charts? Anyone used Gantt charts before? No? Yes, a little bit? Okay. So this is just a way in terms of, if you take this information here and then you put it into here, and then you start set the duration of the days, and you can create a dependency between activity 1, activity 2, activity 3, and then all of this then feeds into this other part of the kind of visual element of it, going, okay, so this thing here is going to be going on for 9 days, right? There's 9 days. You can see that from Monday up to Wednesday there. And then this one is going to be happening over these days. It's a split task, but then I can't start this sprint review thing over here until I've completed this one. So there's a dependency, and you can see that this has got to follow after this, has got to follow after this. And so if you know how long each task is going to take, and you can create those dependencies, you can then see over what period of time you're talking about. And quite often it's much longer than you expect. And then there's a hasty bit about, okay, where can I shave? Where can I do this? Because I want to get on with this quickly. And, you know, for things like this, you can kind of also allocate resources to it, and, you know, you can start to allocate costs to this. So it's a way of kind of then managing the project and the costs and the resources. I'll move on from there. So okay, so there's a trot through waterfall, and then you've got agile. So the agile has been development. It's kind of a Kanban process with kind of following just-in-time principles, which were originally created for the auto industry from Toyota. So it's working on the basis that change in the project is inevitable. Things are always going to change. You can't know everything up front. You can't plan everything up front. You know, the detail of the project is going to change as you go along with it. So what you're trying to do is to go, rather than kind of having this really in-depth, you know, 112 item element of capturing every activity that's got to happen, we're just gonna go through the main chunks of what we've got to do. So you're going to try and reduce that complexity by not trying to outguess everything up front. Move through things, get rapid feedback from what you're trying to do. So, I mean, I think for Agile is probably easier when you've got a core team who are all working together. And if you're working slightly more haphazardly with people, it's maybe harder to keep control. Although, let's say you're employing a web agency to work with you, they may well use this for themselves, but you're not working with them directly. So Agile is dependent on teams working really closely together. So, you know, it's a focusing over the individuals and the interactions between individuals on a regular process of development working together, rather than planning everything up front with the process and the tools that you use for that. It's about a kind of working model as opposed to having comprehensive documentation up front. It's about just trying things out and seeing what works, and then moving on to the next stage after you've captured what that is. It's about working with your customers. I mean, this is probably more client focused, sort of, so you kind of involve more people in the process rather than kind of spelling everything up. So if you're working with a client, let's say, you can say, right, we're going to do this work for you. You disappear for 6 months and then you come back with a product. And quite often, you know, the clients only talk to you once a month and they don't really have an idea what you're up to. And then they go, no, that's not what we wanted. We're not going to pay you. So it's about kind of bringing them along with you on the journey. And it's about having a much faster response to change. So here you go. What you're trying to do is you break up the development. You kind of have this core objective of what you want to do and go, okay, what do we have to do in order to be able to achieve that? That's going to be our first sprint. So you create these things called sprints, and they go through a process where you plan something, you design it, you build it, you test it, and you review it. And then you go, okay, well, that's sort of okay. And then that doesn't work. So let's do that again. So you go through the same process again. So that's week 1, and then this is week 2. And you go, okay, yeah, no, that bit works perfectly. Right, if we got that, let's go on to the next task. So then there needs to be some sort of planning in terms of understanding what those sprints need to involve. But each sprint then gets fed from the work that happened the previous. I mean, quite often sprints are done in weeks, but they don't have to be. So it's this kind of completely iterative process that you're going through one bit after another, after about another. If you want to find out more about Lean, there's a thing, scrumguides.org, and there's a downloadable 19-page PDF up there, and that will tell you through the process if you want to find out more. So what you can do is say, okay, we have to develop something and we're going to dedicate ourselves to 12 weeks, let's say. We're going to do 12-week developments, and so you've got a fixed time. And whatever you've produced at the end of the 12 weeks, that's what's been produced. You know, change is being welcomed. You can iterate all the time. You can see the progress is developing. It's very collaborative. You know, but it does have a, you know, it's kind of, but what happens if what we want at the end of 12 weeks? You know, what do we then have to do? Does that then start pushing the budget ahead? You know, you obviously need to have some understanding in terms of setting a budget, because you need to understand what resources are going to be involved with each sprint, and therefore who's involved in that and what the cost of those people are going to be. Hard to understand because there's a leap, because if you don't really know what you're going to be doing in week 6, because it's dependent on what happens to week 1 to 5. So it requires that trust. It's harder to understand. You know, you've got to have faith in the process. I mean, on the whole, it's used a lot by developers, and it's usually the process of choice more and more. It's very light on documentation, you know, because you can't pre-plan it all. But it requires people to talk a lot together. So, you know, that can be a bit of a drag for people who just want to get on with stuff. So yeah, so those are some of the things. And then, you know, these are the ways that you can work out. So at the beginning, you go, right, let's set up a series of tasks. So this is a Kanban board. You can start to set out all the things that you've got to do. You can put what's in progress. You can put sort of quality assurance stuffs over here. You can say when things are ready for launch. Here's a little way it works type thing. So you can move from one to the other. So, right, this is what needs researching. These are the things we have to do. Right, we've done it. Now we can move it across into the things which are being done at the moment. And then, sorry, the things which are ongoing. And then, right, we've completed them. It's like, right, it's done. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's the way in which the boards can be used. Trello is one thing. There's also things like Asana, Slack. Sorry, Slack is another channel which then brings in a whole chat room element around the project as well. And you can create different channels. And then you've got things like Asana as well, where I was going to ask Mitch to talk a bit about Asana, but we've only got 2 minutes left. So
I can try and be really quick.
Go on.
All right, I'll try. So essentially, the main thing for Asana, I've used it quite a lot. It's great just to get your ideas, your tasks down on paper, so to speak, because the worst thing you can do is have your to-do list in your head, because before you know it, you've got another email coming in and it all just throws everything off. So it just helps you complete your task in a logical manner. So the thing with Asana, it's great for whether you're just a one-man band or, you know, there's multiple people in your team, because you can lay out all the different deadlines, the tasks, who's responsible for them. So as you can see from this initial screen, you can get the overview of tasks, who needs to do them, what resources you need to them. And you can also see what we're calling like the work packages, as we've been talking about today, on the left-hand side. So you can label, you know, whether it be a different client, whether it be a certain task. You can do as much as you like and design it however you feel on the left-hand side. Anthony, do you have a second page of what it's like? Ah, there we go, just like that. So it's very similar to the Trello aspect. There are quite a few similarities between, you know, Asana, Trello, Slack. But this one here is when you can really get into the nitty-gritty of what your work package or task is all about. So you can see almost like the user flow. So it's similar to what Andrew was talking about in the first session. So you can see, you know, either internally you can focus on your objectives, your deadlines, the resources needed. And within each of these tasks, you can upload documents, you can update the status of the task, but also on the client side as well. So whether you're doing consultancy or like an app or something like that, you can do the first stage of the initial inquiry, the conversion, what tasks they've asked you for, what resources you need, all the way up until the finished article. So then really quickly, the pros and cons. The pros of using a thing like Asana is it gives you a lot more control. You can visually see your to-do list rather than it balancing in your head. It's really easy to understand the format and the layout. It's brilliant if you're, you know, by yourself or even as part of a team, because you can see all the communication and where everyone is at on a certain task. And all documents can be stored in one place. You know, we've got the blessing of emails, Google Drive, OneDrive, you name it. Asana, you can just put all your documents on, so it's quick and easy to get into. Things to consider is obviously where it gives you so many avenues to have communication with your team. You know, the communication is rather documented rather than vocal, so it just depends how you prefer to work. But it's also worth setting some time aside to manage this platform, because you don't want to leave it for a couple of months, because all of a sudden it will just be out of date and a little bit of a mess, which won't help anyone. So it's just always worth putting some time aside. And I think I tried to wrap that up in 2 minutes. So if you have any questions, then just ask me and I can give you a lot more of a further explanation anyway.
Thank you, Mitch. That's fantastic. Well, we're almost there. So, well, timesheets is a whole different thing. So those, I mean, the one thing which some people like to adopt is a kind of waterfall planning, agile delivery approach. So, you start doing all of that upfront process, so you've got as much thought as you can get upfront. But actually, in terms of the delivery, using the agile process can help in terms of just having a bit more flexibility, and that's something I've seen happening more and more. So anyway, there you go. There's a whistle-stop tour of. Let me stop the share. Yeah, whistle-stop tour of some kind of how to manage your project. So it's 12 o'clock as well. So have you any questions?
Yes, is it possible to speak to you between these sessions?
Yeah,
from
sure.
Wednesday.
I'll set something up with you separately, Judith.
Thank you.
We'll get in touch. And sorry, and the other thing is I've also got some mentors set up for everyone, more or less. So I will get some details to you this week. Sorry, I think I said that last week and I didn't, I failed. But I will make sure it happens for this week. Yes, good.
Oh,
yeah.
I missed the deadline to submit my 200-word description of what I'm doing. Is there any chance that could be extended or?
Yeah, no, of course. It's an interactive thing that we're doing on the site. So, you know, a lot of people have already sent them through, but we can just add yours as and when you're ready, and that goes the same for everybody. It was just we wanted to try and get as many people on it as possible before launching it. So yeah, honestly, it can be done whenever, and we can just update it as and when.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Right.
Can I just ask a question to Anthony? I was fascinated.
Let me just say goodbye to Andrew first. Do you have to go, Andrew?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I need to drop off for 12 o'clock. So thank you, everybody. Great to see everybody again. I'll see you. I'll see you soon. I'll speak to you later. Anthony. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you next week, Andrew.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, can I just ask a question about, I was quite interested in funding. I see you've got funding from the Euro for this course.
Yep.
So what is going to happen? How, you put this in a very short way, how will Brexit affect your work as of January the 1st?
Well, nobody has got a straight answer on that at the moment. I think it's the honest reply that there is talk that there will be fund. Well, to be honest, our funding is very haphazard. We don't have guaranteed funding from anywhere. So that's why we've set up the Silicon South network. So what we're trying to do is to turn Silicon South into, well, again, it's kind of the things that Andrew was talking about. Are people prepared to contribute towards something like this? And that's the question we're going through at the moment. So we've created the Silicon South network. We are applying fees for people to support that. And that doesn't cover everything, but it hopefully will get to a stage where we can provide a very basic service for people across Dorset. On top of that, we are hoping that there might be some more finance available through different channels, but we have no idea because there will be no more European money for sure. There is some talk that it'll be replaced by funds from central government, but there's no indication of how that money will be spent. In fact, I've got a conversation with the council later, which might give me a few clues, but but anyway, we have a lot of goodwill, and if some more funding becomes available, then hopefully we will be able to become a part of that. But yes, there's no clear answer, I'm afraid.
Well, I wish you well.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to keep in touch to see how this develops.
Well, we're around for a while. We're not going away just yet, but we're certainly in place till September next year, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Well, if I'm ever in a position to support you, I will.
Thank you. So, Tracy, you've got to go.
You've got that recorded.
I just wanted to check if Tracy and Judith have got the same florists working for them.
Yes, I thought the same.
No.
I think
all my own work. All my own work.
Something no. Anthony, I just wanted to ask you. I missed the thing about mentoring, but I saw mentoring as an option on through the network. Did you say you organizing mentors for us, or do we have to apply?
Yeah, so what I'm doing is to make sure that there is everyone gets a session with somebody. It might be with Andrew, but kind of various people who I think might be able to have a productive conversation for you to talk through all the stuff that's been going, been going through your minds over this, and just have a chance to talk to somebody that isn't me. It could be Andrew. I mean, it could be me if you want. And just so that there is a time to have that one-to-one conversation dedicated on what you're doing. So that's going to be a one-off, maybe a couple of sessions, and then we have a separate mentoring program. But because it's all funded through Europe and there's a kind of limit to how much support we're meant to be giving to everybody, that essentially depending on what the response is, that if we get lots of people asking for it, then we will focus on people who haven't been through this process. But if we've got some spaces, then we will give it to you as well if people have want it. I know one or two people have asked about it.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Do you guys want to have some time to talk with each other, or does everyone need to get off?
Can I ask you one question? It's about it's about registering a name.
Sorry, about what?
Domain name.
Oh yes.
It's about registering a name on domain name.
Yeah.
Is it a good idea to do this even before the whole concept is completely thought through?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a name, finding a name is very hard, which hasn't been taken already. But just go on to any of the domain name kind of engines. I use low cost names, but there's 123 and various other people, and just do a search. And if it's there, go for it. What do you think about GoDaddy? I don't have an opinion either way. I've never used them. Okay. I mean, they all do the same thing.
I think that's a good name for your organization. GoDaddy. That niche market of dads who are so can't do anything, they're too tired.
Yeah, all right, yeah, well, I better go as well. So anyway, love to see you all. See you next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks, Anthony.
Bye-bye, Anthony,
Bye.
Tracy, Cecile, everyone, and Mitch, and John. Bye-bye.
Bye.